everybody from the Antarctic region of Central Florida. That is a joke because I am in Central Florida and I'm going to pop up a video at the end, or maybe even now. This is such a novelty for me, but my fountain froze and it has icicles hanging off of it. It was about 25 degrees when I took my dog out this morning, and it's not supposed to go above freezing until after 11 o'clock today, which is crazy. I'm a lifelong Floridian. I love it. It's such a novelty for me, but it's such a great day for a big, like really getting involved with a beading project. So I have a cup of coffee and I have this big mess on my mat. I'm going to clear this away, but this is an introduction to bead embroidery, and it's by request because I've been flashing this pendant around. I wore it to the Pompano Beach bead show that I videotaped for you guys, and I've shown as an example for some smaller projects that I was doing. And I've gotten some requests, and I know Diane Bolanani and her sister Debbie have purchased the moon faces and popped them out of the frames, and they've been waiting for this tutorial, and I think a few others of you as well. So it's not going to be this. I hate to tell you, but it's not going to be this. I don't have any more of these 2-hole beads that sort of look like moon rocks, and this was a leftover bit. It's a connector for a bracelet that I sewed in for my bail. So some of these supplies I just don't have anymore, but I'm going to do the exact same bezel, and I'm going to show you how to do the beaded back stitch. So if you hate peyote, doing peyote bezels, if this is just like outside of your wheelhouse, you can totally do this project without doing this part, and I'm going to show you how to do that. I actually have a sample here and I have a video on this, but there is literally no peyote stitch and no bezeling on this small piece of bead embroidery. This is just simply beaded back stitch and some cup chain using seed beads and 3mm check glass rounds. Like super simple. There's just 3 rows there, and it's this gorgeous bead embroidery piece. And so even if you're a complete beginner, or even if there's part of this that you're saying, oh no, I can never do that, you can do it, and I'm going to show you how. So the reason that I have such a mess on my mat is to kind of give you an overview, because you'll be going into your stash, and the things you can use for bead embroidery are like literally everything that we do in all of our types of jewelry. So I always think, like, for my fringe, so you know, you can do anything on the fringe. I have rhombus beads, I have dagger beads, bugle beads, of course seed beads, and then any little charms. Like these were from Sam's Bead Box, and I ordered some extras of these North Star charms. I thought they were just perfect for a celestial, like, moon pendant. So that's what I have here, is some drops to choose from. I like these little Orion beads for adding, you know, filling in, because one of the things you do a lot of with bead embroidery is kind of filling in so you don't see your backing. And I have check glass faceted rounds and some check glass pearls here in different sizes and colors. In my project, I'm going to continue with the same color story of kind of turquoise and blue greens, teal, that kind of thing. Things that are left over. This is Bargain Bead Box from last month. These little crystals, little triangle lilac crystals. I'll show you my idea for these. I also have some turquoise cup chain, and I have some other cup chain. I actually have a project tray off to the side that I pulled all of this out of. But if you have these Checkmates cabochons that have 2 holes, those can be really great for bead embroidery. And as I said, I get my check glass rounds out. I have purples and turquoises and opalescent turquoise. Seed beads, a collection of seed beads. You always pretty much need 15 O's and 11 O's. I also have some 8 O's out here because they can be used to just sew around, just sew down. Teacup beads. My friend Peggy Bush sent these to me in a little gift that she had, and I was thrilled. I love this mix, but they are perfect. There are some kind of 2 different colors of metallic purple in here. So like these little teacup beads, almost anything that you have, your bicones. I love these like Aztec gold. It's like a muted or like a matte metallic gold. These are little 3mm drucks. Those can be useful. I have some twisted bugle beads here, 15 O's in a few colors. I pull out things like these little prong set crystals. You know, that was left over from something. I just purchased this at a bead show, and I'll show you why I have it out here. Like, it matches my moon face so well. And I am not opposed to doing a bezel or a design on this and then attaching two pieces of bead embroidery, so it's like really over the top. Like, the sky is the limit on this, and I will tell you, this is not an exact science, which is what I love about it. It's so creative. So if you guys that are watching this, if you want to copy what I'm doing exactly, I am honored, and that'd be great. But I've come to know most of you through chatting, and I kind of like know your colors that you like, and those of you that are boho girls, and you know, I kind of come to know. And I feel like when we get started on this, if you're beading along with me, that you're going to take off and do your own thing. And you know, I kind of hope you will. So again, I'm not going to repeat what I did, but I'm going to show you how to do it, and you can take whatever shape you want. So before we get started, the things you absolutely will need are a beading needle, and I have an 11 beading needle here. I am using this Toho 1G thread, and I'm basically matching my project, and that's threaded and ready to go. I'll put a link for this in the description box. I am really passionate about my bead embroidery, so I got this color assortment, and I just love having all those colors to choose from. I also have some neutral KO thread. These are nylon threads, and I'll show you why I like that. I also have a little thing of beeswax. If you're not familiar, you just take your these nylon threads and run them through the beeswax like that, and it just keeps them from twisting and getting tangled. So you don't have to have that, but it makes the work easier. It makes the thread, I just work it in with my fingers. It makes the thread go well through the project. And so the other thing that I have here is ultra suede for my backing. And this one, I'm having trouble finding this. It's out of stock in a lot of places. And so this is the thing with this, you can actually do your embroidery right on the ultra suede and then take another piece to create the back, which would look like this for your piece. But I don't really like to do that. I prefer to use a backing like Lacey's Stiff Stuff. This is an off-brand that I found on Amazon that came in a color assortment. The Lacey Stiff Stuff, I think, only comes in white or black, and then you've got to deal with your backing showing through. Unfortunately, my color assortment of my backing didn't come in a turquoise or a purple or even a neutral. So, but this is better than white, and you'll see, you really don't see it too much. Like, you know, you're looking on the edge of this one and you don't even know what color my backing was on that one, but I do try to match my color pretty well. So I'll get my ultra suede out at the very end to put the back on my piece. So you do kind of need some kind of an ultra suede, and I actually found an assortment of faux leather and faux suede on Amazon that came with, I don't know, 8 or 10 colors that was very inexpensive, and you got like really large sheets. So I'll put a link for that in the description box as well. So and if you want to bypass the ultra suede altogether, you can use a nice thick filigree and glue your bead embroidery onto a filigree, and with E6000 glue, you know, put a tie tack or a pin on the back, or a glue-on bail, or large jump rings. Let's see, I think I have another one from this video. I do. I have another one from this video where I actually did do a tiny bit of peyote, but I just put a giant jump ring through the filigree so my chain or leather cord can go through there. So you can finish these in very, very easy ways. And so that is that. And you need really, really sharp scissors for sure. And I usually have a marker for tracing. I do a lot of eyeballing, but if you're a person that doesn't feel comfortable with that, some kind of a marker or a pen or a pencil to give yourself some guidelines for stitching on your piece is really good. So I'm going to just show you a couple of things that I own, that I've had for maybe 30 years, because I am also a paper crafter. and that's how I got my template. But I'm going to just show you this because if you do paper crafting or if you have any kind of art supplies, you may have something similar, and it can be really useful in getting your starting pattern for bead embroidery. So I have a sliding cutter here. It's not going to really want to fit under the camera, but I was a paper crafter. That was pretty much all I did for about a decade. I really love doing that. So I have this really fancy cutter, and then these are also about 30 years old. I don't even know if these are still available, and I have probably 30 of these templates from Fiskars, and they come with this cutter. So you would lay this down on your paper and then on your cardstock, and then this has a little blade in it, and then you just like trace around and you get like really perfect shapes, you know, out of your paper. And so these are paper crafting supplies. I did not check before I started filming to see if Fiskars still even makes these because they're so old, but that is what I used. I think it was this square, and I just traced inside with a pen to get my square. And then I put my square in my cutter that I showed you and went and cut it from corner to corner to get a perfect triangle. And then that's what I traced onto my backing, and then I just rough cut out my backing, and this is ready to start embroidering on. The other thing this can be useful for, this cardboard is literally the back of a notebook. It just, you know, it's not acid free. It's not like any kind of special paper. It's just really stiff. It was the back of a writing pad. And the other thing is, if you really want to stiffen up your bead embroidery piece after, you can put this in between your ultra suede and in between your backing to give your piece a little bit more body. So you can use these. And I may do that. I have this, I have these here, so I may do that. I'm also going to pull in my sketchbook because I was just doodling kind of some designs with my moon. I'm going to call this the Mysterious Man in the Moon pendant. And this is the one I'm going to go for. I was doodling with some different ways that I want to fill in my pendant and how I want to feature this moon face. So I did a little bit of sketching, but this is not an exact science. And for me, what I do is literally start with my biggest focal, my biggest cabochon, or my biggest thing that I'm going to add in, and I build on that. So I already know that it's going to be this, and I belong to the Adornable Elements Beads of the Month Club. They're Delica Beads of the Month Club and Seed Beads of the Month Club is the main reason that I signed up for that monthly box, because I get those beads in a curated collection. I get the single quantity, but it's available in double as well. And I absolutely love, love, love the quality of the seed beads, the price of them, colors that I don't see in the marketplace. So that's what I'm going to use. It's the same exact bead that I used to bezel this guy. So I'm going to start with that. So I already know that that's my start, is Mr. Moon and those purple Delicas. And then I'm going to build from there. I picked this up at a bead show, and I was literally thinking of doing it as a separate piece and then attaching the two. I may or may not do that. This is so relaxing, and the world is just so crazy right now. And for me, at least, everything from identity theft, the crazy freezing weather, my son is having some problems again. I'm a little bit underwater right now, and I am leaning into my beading to help me cope with it. And these kinds of projects are so relaxing and creative and cognitive, and it's positive. And so if you're feeling like I am, maybe give this a try. So I am going to clean up a little bit so that we can actually focus and start working, because you know, I do this layer by layer, and I may also put some marks on this once I adhere my pieces down. But what I wanted to show you is that I was thinking I'm going to take another piece of backing, and I am going to bezel my moon face separately, because I want to, this is going to go this way. I'm going to do the loops that way. And I was thinking of adhering this filigree so that it hangs over the edge. And then once the man is bezeled, he's going to get adhered right here so that I just have a little bit of this like a lace shadow. I'm thinking like fantasy celestial things, and I was thinking like the shadow of the moon, but to do it with a lace filigree. So that's just my beginning idea, and that's what I'm going to start with, and then I'll build on that. So give me a second to clean up and we're going to get started. So like I said, you can trace and give yourself lines, but I'm gonna do my bezel right on here. So if I didn't, I can't remember if I showed you guys this, but here in America we have a national chain called Hobby Lobby, and these are always 50% off, so $2.50 for this. And I just took a beating awl and popped this little glass cabochon out of this kind of cheap frame. And so that's what I did to get my moon face. This one was a little bit rough on his nose, so I made use him for something else and do some gold on his little face. But that is what that is. And so, and I don't know about, I know they do have a website, and there are check glass moon faces. So check your websites if you're not in America and you would love to have one of these. Maybe you'll find a check glass moon cabochon is what you type in on Etsy or one of the websites that you buy beads and cabs from. But that's where he came from. If you're in America, that's where he came from, and I'm quite in love with him. And so I even thought about, because at the bead shows that I go to, they are a lot of faces. People sell a lot of different faces. They're really popular. And I even thought about doing a female face and calling it the mysterious moon girl or something. And so in my theme for this, as I said, I'm thinking celestial elements. So the North Star, these little teacup beads, I'm thinking moon craters to add texture to the surface of my piece, and shadows and stars and that kind of thing. That's what to carry my theme throughout. So the other thing that you will need is some E6000. I keep toothpicks on my work table because you don't want to be messy. You don't want glue oozing all over everything. The glue is simply to hold a few of the things in place so they don't shift as you embroider around them. And if you ooze it out of the sides, you will not be able to get your needle through the places that you need to go. So we really just want a very thin layer of glue on our piece. And then I'm gonna spread this out with my toothpick, and I'm gonna stay away from the very edge of my cab. Okay, and I'm just gonna put Mr. Moon down on there, and I only need a 15-0 Delica's bead width around the edge, so I'm just gonna adjust it, and this excess will get trimmed away after I get this little tiny bit of peyote bezel done. So I'm just making sure that I have a beads width away, and I used my scrap, so so I'm not wasting my backing material. And I'm just going to let that dry for a little bit. And then over here, since I know that I want to adhere my filigree like that, I am going to go ahead and trim this edge. I'm going to stay on the outside of my line. And I'm going to go ahead, while I have my glue out, and adhere my filigree to the backing here. And again, not a lot of glue because my needle needs to go through, needs to go through the backing around this filigree. So I'm just going to press that down, and I'm using the design on the filigree, so it's not quite right in the middle of it, but I have this little edge here. That is going to be a little creative when I go to put my beaded edge around. For sure, that's going to cause me problems. I can tell you that it will, but that's what I love about this. I love the creativity of this so much. And so then when this is bezeled, it's going to get adhered so that there's just a tiny bit of that lacy metal hanging out underneath. I really love the idea, so I hope I can execute it well. So we're going to start now. Ideally, in a perfect world, I would let this dry for about 30 minutes, but it is such a small bezel, and I think it will be okay for me to go ahead and start. So I do not like to tie knots on my nylon thread. They can come undone, plus they get a little bit messy. So what I do is take my thread zap, and be prepared if you're doing this, be prepared to blow, because sometimes the nylon thread just catches on fire and it will run. So be prepared to blow it out like a, like a candle. But I'm gonna melt a little ball on the end. So I'm just gonna light up my thread zap here, red hot. And so I have a little melted ball, and that's my knot. That is my preferred way to get started. And I am going to come up from my backing, just barely skimming. That's a little too close. I want to be about a bead, about a delicate bead width away from my backing. And the reason for that is when you bezel, you don't want to be crowded, and you don't want to be so close to whatever you're bezeling that your beads kind of start rolling underneath the piece. And this needs to be even count peyote. So you're going to pick up 2 beads at a time, and I'm going to bring those down to my work here. And I'm going to lay them and pull my thread taut around the shape that I'm bezeling. Push those beads right back to where it started, but not bunched up. I want nothing to be crowded. I want them to lay in a nice, neat row. And then I'm going to poke my needle back down through my backing right in front of that last bead. This is backstitch. This is not peyote. This is beaded backstitch. And this method here is what you will use for doing pretty much everything else, but I'm going to show you also a couching technique for getting a row of beads in. But as I said, if you didn't want to do peyote, all of these other beads that you see in a little row, the seed beads, were all done with beaded backstitch. It's very, very easy, very repetitive, and very relaxing. So now that we've done that, I'm on the back side. I'm going to poke my needle back up in between those 2 beads that I just added, just right in between. And I'm going to go forward through that first one. Just advance my needle without picking up a bead and give it a little tug. So they're laying right beside my moon, and they're in a nice row. And then I'm going to pick up 2 more and repeat that. And I'm going to repeat that all the way around. And hopefully I have enough to just continue in 2s. But if it doesn't end up with a nice even number fitting around my cab, I'll show you what to do. So for my measurement, I'm just pulling my thread, letting those beads lay right in line with the others. Put my needle straight down through my backing. I don't want to loop inside my thread. And like everything, you know, pretty much anything, whether you're stringing or anything, getting started is really the hardest part. And this first like row that we peyote is going to be a little wobbly, just the way it would if you were doing it flat in your hand. So don't get discouraged, just go slowly and get it in there. So same thing, I'm coming out the back, I'm going to poke my needle up through those 2 beads that I just added in between the first 2 and the second 2. And the same thing, advance my needle forward through the 2 that I just added. Just give it a little tug, and I'm going to continue like that, 2 beads at a time all the way around my moon. Okay, so I've gone all the way around, trying to be as even as I can, and then when I get near the end, I want to see how many more beads I can put on. And again, it has to be an even number for even count. So I have 4 beads on here, and as you could see, I can't fit 2 more. I could maybe fit 1 more. So in this case, what I'm going to do is just spread these out into this space a little bit. But if you feel like that's not going to give you a clean enough, I think it will, because I had a little bit of space here. But you can always pull your needle off and pull out a few stitches and come to where you had a little bit more space and just kind of readjust your spacing. But I think I'm going to be okay with my last 4. So I'm just going to pull that taut, and it's going to be pretty perfect. And I'm going to put this right where I started. And then whenever you do beaded back stitch, it's a really, let me go back 2 and come advance my needle forward, and I'll show you. But even though this is the base for the peyote, even if it weren't, even if that was just going to be my frame, it's a really good idea to run your needle around your whole line of beads. Just we call it reinforcing, but it doesn't, not so much reinforce, but it smooths out the line. It gives you a really nice, straight, even line. You know, so just go like a few at a time all the way around. And I can't remember if I said, because I wanted to introduce you to all the bits and bobs. If you don't have access to like this moon cab, you can bezel anything, and these same steps, these same principles will work for, you know, whatever you have. So if you have a coin, you can bezel that. I showed you the gemstone I picked up at the show, glass, you know, pieces of glass, like really anything. This principle works for bezeling anything. And so if you want to copy my design and take a screenshot as we go, like I said, I'd be really flattered and honored, but these simple stitch principles really do work for whatever you want to bezel. I would like to bezel a lire coin from, you know, that were in Italy when I was a little girl before they started using the euro like the rest of, you know, Europe. So that might be my next bezel, is a coin, but it's the same principle. So I'm just going to come out after I've gone all the way around. And now I just start peyote, and it is exactly the same thing. Pay close attention to the bead that you're coming out of. Pick up a bead. You're going to skip the next bead after the one you're coming out of and insert your needle through that bead. And as I said, every stitch on the planet is a little wobbly and a little kind of funky when you first start. So don't be intimidated by the fact that this is going around a cabochon. Just get it in there, and just like when we start with the peyote in our hand, we're going to start looking for that bead to be stacked. Give it a little tug. Watch your tension though, but give it a little tug so that there's 2 beads, 1 bead, pick up another bead, look where you're coming out of, skip that next bead and go through the one after that. And, you know, don't be too aggressive with your tension at this point, but give that a little tug. And just like, you know, if you need to use your needle to line up the 2 beads, 1 bead, 2 bead, and we're just making those little teeth or like little zipper teeth. Pick up a bead, pay close attention. I'm coming out here, skip that one, go through that one. I do this really slowly and carefully because if you mess up this first row, then the rest of your peyote will not turn out. So just do it very slowly and carefully. And make sure before you move on, see how that bead is setting. Before I move on, I'm going to make sure that this little guy is in there where I want him. If I have to use my needle to get them lined up so that I can see 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, and I'm going to keep going just like that all the way around. Okay, I'm coming back around to where I started. So I'm going to pick up a bead. I'm coming out of this bead. I'm going to skip this one and go through this one. And then after that, there is nowhere for me to go except through that first bead that I added. That's the step up, and that puts me in position to start another row. And here's where this will be different for everyone, how many rows you do. I think I did 5 on my other guy, but it depends on how much of your moon face or your coin or your cabochon you want to cover up, how much you want to see, and how well it's cinched in. Glass can have some irregularities around the edge, like the moon face has a little bit of thickness. So sometimes I'll feel that I need an extra row just to make it look nice. I'm gonna do how many I think, and then my last row or 2 will be the 15 O's. The smaller seed beads kind of cinch in your bezel and make it, you know, like slurp up, like cinch up around the face. So I'm gonna continue just like that with my peyote, picking up a bead, going through the next up bead or sticking up bead. And so it's the same thing where you're skipping one and going through one, but this row is much easier because we're coming out here. The bead that we skip is recessed down there. So it becomes really easy on this row. You're always going through that up bead. And I'm just going to work my way around, maybe 2 more rows, and then do the same thing with my 15 O's. Okay, I finished my little bezel and I came down through my peyote at an angle and came out the back. And I'm just going to, I actually zigzagged through it a little bit to create some tension. So I can tie a knot, but I don't really need to because I'm about to cover this with glue and adhere it to my main piece. And I just want to say too that you can, you know, I'm being really creative, and that's what I love about this by doing this in layers, but you can, glue your cab right onto your backing and have all one level and, you know, do that same bezel around it with it on your backing. But, you know, I get really creative with this. So I just love that. Love doing different things with it. And I may have to, you know, kind of troubleshoot my work here when I get to the next steps, but that's okay. I love the challenge of the mechanics of my design just as well. So I'm just going to come in really carefully and trim away this extra back. Let me get a little plastic dish so I don't make a mess on my mat. And you can even do this from the back side because you really don't want to cut your stitches. That's really important. It's not the end of the world if you do. You can definitely fix it, but ideally you don't snip those stitches. You just remove any backing that you can see from the front. And also when you're cutting your backing, if you can hold your scissors like parallel with your piece instead of at an angle, that gives you a nice straight edge by which you can add your next row of beads. This is mostly going to be covered up with my next row of beaded backstitch, but my mysterious man in the moon is looking great. Oh, there's my needle. And so what I'm going to do now is cover him, the back of him, in glue, and he's going to get adhered to this filigree like maybe right about there, but I've created this funny little space in here. So I am going to just fill that in with what I cut off here, so that, you know, everything is, I will have highs and lows on my piece, but I'm just going to use this as a little bit of a template and just cut around so that everything will be flat. So what I mean is that's going to hang over the edge of my filigree, and I'll be gluing my moon on top of that so that everything is flat. So right there I have like a nice flat space and no dead air going underneath. So I'm just going to hold that into place and trim away what I don't need. Okay, so I'm going to add a tiny little bit of glue right around my filigree here for that little filler piece of backing. I love the dimensionality of these pieces, the highs and the lows, and like nothing is flat. Everything is so interesting and unexpected, and these pieces are just, you know, over the top most of the time. So I'm going to put that on there, and I'm going to just make sure before I really stick it down that that's where I want my moon. And I think I want it over just a little bit. I love the E6000 because it does give you time. Okay, and now I'm going to turn this guy over and do a nice thin layer of glue on the back of this. Okay, and again, I don't want the glue oozing over the edge. Right in there. Make sure he's looking in the direction I want him, and just press down. Just make sure that it's in place. And so it looks like that. And so I had already decided my next step is going to be to add these 4mm check glass fire polish. And I thought about 6mm, so I might play with that. I'm going to start a new thread, and that's the other thing. As you make your design decisions on these pieces, you may do a row of beads or start a row and then realize it's not the look you want. So I do tie off after every row of beads or after every addition of beads. So like, oops, it's really better. I have a 4mm strand here. If they're still on the strand, it's better to get a look, but that's not quite going to cover my backing, but I'm going to do a further embellishment on top of this row. So I still think that the 4mm will work and give me a nice curve. So I'm going to thread my needle and come in with these green turquoise 4mm rounds and do a beaded backstitch row around. And it's exactly the same thing that we did with the peyote stitch, that first beaded backstitch row. Those steps, exactly the same thing. On the larger beads, I will generally add in one bead at a time. But I'm going to show you another method when you have long rows to do that's much faster and still looks really good and gives you a nice straight line. I have another little melted ball, and I'm going to actually come up through my backing and maybe even through the filigree if I can find a little spot. And just go back down through my backing and come back up just to start me off. And come up right here at the edge of my filigree, and you can see it's the same as before. I'm parallel to my bezel, and I'm going to start by picking up 2 of my beads, and same exact thing as I did before. Lay those in place and then poke my needle back down right in front, straight down right in front of the first one. And then after those first 2, I'm going to add one at a time, go back 2, advance my needle forward, just that beaded back stitch. So it looks like that. I'm going to pick up 1. Whoops. To come back up, have to come back up before you pick up the next one. I'm getting ahead of myself. Poke my needle up in between those 2. And then advance my needle forward and then pick up 1. Just like that. So it looks like that. Same thing. Drop that bead down right in line and see right where it lands. Put my needle down. Like I try to go right in front of the bead and straight down. Like that, and go back. Go back 2. Advance forward again, and I'm just going to do that all the way around. Okay, next row is going to be these 3mm drucks. So when I finished this back stitch up to here, up to my filigree, I poked up in between my bezel and my row. And then I'm just picking up one of these 3mm beads and going back down just a little bit beside it in that same space. And I am kind of, before I move on, kind of putting my needle in there and making sure that my holes are going that way all the way around this layer. And then just give it a little tug and then poke back up to the next little section, and I'm going to do that row all the way around. Okay, so my layer here is done. My next step is going to be to put a frame of twisted bugle beads around the edge. So I'm trying to stay like right on that line that I penciled in, or maybe just slightly inside. And I have out here some vintage seed beads that I got at my Bead Society meeting. And what I'm going to do here is show you the couching method, and you can also use this in places where you would do the beaded backstitch, like we did here, where you add one at a time, poke down through, you know, go forward through 2. You can do this where you string on your entire length of your beads. Obviously, I'm coming up from the back, and you lay it down, you know, basically where you want it, and poke your needle through at the end of where that line would be, straight down. And then you're going to go back and tack it down, which is also the same way that we tack down cup chain. You know, cup chain, let me show you some. It has these little metal bridges in between the crystals that you can either push them tight together or pull it out. And when you're tacking this down without using glue, you can just do your little thread loops right over those bridges. And it's called couching. If you know embroidery, then you might be familiar with that. Backwards, I'm gonna go backwards, and I'm going to go basically where the seed beads are, and come up from the back and put my thread over the thread that my line of beads is on. We'll just make sure that it goes in between. And I'm gonna poke back through on this side, like directly across. And when I pull, it just, you know, the thread just goes down in between the bugle bead and the seed bead. And then I'm gonna come up the next one, and you know, you got it. Do that whole tack it down all the way to the back, the end where I started. And even when you're doing this couching or this, you know, tack down, you can still run your needle and thread back down through everything that you've just done, the same way that we did backstitch. That just helps give you a nice straight line for this little border. And I think I told you, I think I said, I don't always do a border. Sometimes I let my beads just end, because there will be a final beaded border going around after I put the ultra suede backing on. So just like that, and I'll show you. I'm gonna pull this and I'll show you. Don't let it get tangled up there. So that gives me a nice, straight, clean border. And I'm gonna poke up right here at the very tip. And here's all you do is just figure out what is the right number of beads. So it looks like I can do a seed bead, a bugle bead, a seed bead, and a bugle bead to finish this side. Okay, I'm actually going to remove a seed bead and a bugle bead. And that's really what you do as you're building your piece, and also why I say this is not an exact science, because, you know, that's leaving me a little bit of space on the tip of this part of the triangle, but that's totally okay. I could round this more because I do intend to put some fringe. And so you just make those design decisions as you're building your piece, make those little adjustments in fitting things. I'm going to go back in and fill this in, but I'm going to do it in some interesting ways. Okay, my framing is all done, and I've been playing with this corner right here, and I've decided to put in 3 of these really gorgeous dagger beads. But they're if you do dagger beads like for fringe or on the edge, you know, they work really well, but they only have 1 hole. So when you want to put them in the middle of your piece, you really have to use some glue, because otherwise they would always want to, you know, lift up. There's just no way to sew down that end. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on these. I can still access the holes and run my needle through, but I'm going to glue those into place in that corner like that. And then I have this corner to either do a teacup bead or a fire polish round. You know, I'll decide that after I have these adhered. And again, my needle, I'm still coming up the back of my of my piece quite a lot. So I don't want to put glue oozing all over everything. Just a teeny little bit and not blocking the hole, and it's not going to ooze out. Sometimes trying to keep my fingers out of the glue, it's better to have like your pliers to help you. So I want to get that angle. I'm pushing them against my two sides of my frame and up to the corner. So then I have this little middle area here that I can put a little dot of glue and put my third dagger. And then I'll embellish from there. And like I say, I can still access the holes because I think I am gonna do some beads in between. And I just see a little bit of E6000. I love the E6000 for this. There is a couple of other glues that are great for this, but what I love is that I have about 30 minutes before I can't move it anymore. And it doesn't ruin your project because it's nice and thick and it doesn't ooze out under things, but it dries rubbery. So any bend in your project, these will bend with it. And also if you have like a little bit that you see, you can pull those rubber strands off. So it really doesn't ruin your project to use a little dot of that E6000. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry a little bit before I start embellishing. And then I have to just make some decisions here about what I'm gonna do now to fill in. I do want some texture on this, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So I'm gonna get my pen in here and give myself some guidelines for stitching. Before I draw my lines, I decided to do something just to give me a little bit better idea of my next rows. I'm gonna take these 3mm crystal bronze Maria fire polish, and I'm gonna do a back stitch row just around the moon face, just so, let me zoom in a little bit, just so that I have some rich, like a rich dark color. And then I pulled out these little Montes. They are, let me get my needle in here and show you. You can sew them down or you can put a little bit of glue. They have little holes, 4 little holes. So you can run needle and thread through them. They have 4 little holes. And I got this color assortment. And so they're just really sparkly. And I picked out a couple here, and I have some extras. I may want to pop those in, but I have 2 purple ones for here and then an AB crystal here. I'll zoom out. Oh, one other thing I wanted to tell you. I can go ahead and take these off of here now because I know what I'm doing there. I do tie off, and forgive me if these projects are so long to film. I might have already told you this, but I have finished my edging, and even though I can still use this thread, I don't need to cut the thread and get a new thread, but I tie off at the end of every embellishment. So like this edging that I did, I'm gonna go ahead and tie off on the backing. And the reason I do that is just in case that I do a row, my next row, and I wanna cut it away. Like if I change my mind or I don't like the way something is fitting, if this is tied off, then I don't lose, you know, that part that I want to keep. So that can just save you because again, this is not an exact science, it's a creative process. And like I absolutely love the way this is turning out. And you guys will find that if you've never done this before, some of you already know what I'm talking about, but you'll find that with everything that you add, it becomes more and more delicious and beautiful and textural. And it's just like, it's just amazing. So I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna find my way over, actually I'm pretty much here where I need to be. I'm going to come right up here and start my row of these little Maria, bronze Maria. Okay, so I popped in a little Monty on either side of my moon face, and I have that row back stitched in, and my needle is now coming up right on this side of that last row, and I'm going to switch to some 15-0 embellishments. I'm going to guess that this will take 5. So I'm going to start with 5 gold 15-0s on my needle, and I'm going to bring them down, and I'm going to poke my needle back down through my backing between the 3mm and the 4mm rows here. So just like that. And when I pull snug, I can see that I have just the right amount of space. My thread won't show, and I really love that. So I'm going to, let's see, when you do beaded backstitch, unlike when we did the backstitch to start our peyote, it doesn't matter if you have an odd or an even number. You know, on this one we had to do 2 at a time and end up with an even number for even count peyote. But when you're just adding in rows, you don't have to worry about that, except if you want to do an embellishment where you go every other every other bead. And sometimes I like to do every other bead on the 3mm. So let's see where that's going to end me up. If I go here, skip this one, here, skip, here, skip. It actually works out perfectly. It finishes where my last loop would be here, leaving this plain just the way that it is on this side. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to poke up now in between the 2 rows again, but skipping over a bead. So I'm going to leave every other bead without a little gold seed bead embellishment. So 5 more 15-0 seed beads. And I'll go back down. And I'm going to do a little row, a little line of 15-0s. I'm going to try it. I'm going to start with 6 and just lay those on top of my dagger beads and see what that, just to define those a little bit. It's beautiful, but I need more. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, 9. I'm going to pull one off. Let those drop down right there and poke my needle straight down on top of my middle dagger bead and just let those lay right on top of there. And now I'm going to come over here and add in these little crystals, and then I think do 2 more rows of those seed beads coming on either side of my middle dagger bead. So I have tacked my cup chain down, and now I'm at the point of filling in, and I do that 1 bead at a time. So I've run my needle through here. I put 1 11/0 gold seed bead there. I put 1 3mm druck here, and I'm going to pop in another 11/0 seed bead here. And I'm just filling in, and that's really like on an individual basis, like how much of your backing, you know, seeing it is acceptable to you. Like I'm okay with that. I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. I'm going to poke my needle up right there and take one of these little purple drucks. They're kind of rustic, they're acid etched. And I'm just going to pop that right in that little space. But if seeing that much of your backing there doesn't bother you, then you know you don't do this. But in areas like this, I just go 1 bead at a time. And so I can fit an 11/0 right here, the same as the other side. So I'm going to come up just right in that little space and pop 1 bead in there. And this is also how I'm going to create some texture with some of the smaller beads that I have out on. I caught my little thread. I put cleaned up a little bit, and so it's grabbing everything. I have put some rows in going, you know, horizontally to my triangle in my colors, and I did 1 pretty large row down here and did that same little seed bead bridge. I had 15/0 turquoise here. And then I started with a little bit of texture. And what that is these lilac crystal triangles with a gold 11/0 seed bead at the top, or I'm sorry, a 15/0. And then I'm sprinkling in between that some of the Orion beads with an 11/0 in the middle. And you know, where I said don't crowd things here, the clusters or the texture, I do want to crowd it a little bit. I want it to, you know, like be textural. I want it to have highs and lows. So I'm coming up right here and I'm going to pick up one of my Orion beads and drop that down. I'm going to pick up a 15/0 and run my needle just back down through the Orion bead and through my backing. And so when I pull, you know, it's just the 15/0 is acting as a stopper. And so I do want some of these to be flat so that I can see that it's an Orion bead, and I want some of them to be kind of on their side. I'm going to come up here and pop in a crystal. And so that's my texture section. And sometimes I create texture with bugle beads standing straight up like grass. I may go back in the middle of this with some of these little 15/0 turquoise beads and just do like some little grassy turquoise bits coming out of the middle. I kind of create my texture with my heart, and it's usually pretty near to the last thing that I do too, because it's a great way to fill in places where you might still be seeing your backing a little bit. So when I'm finished with this, I am going to skip over to this corner, and I'm going to do the same thing with these little teacup beads with a gold 11/0 in the middle of those, or maybe even like a 15/0 seed bead loop. I'll play around with that, but it's really the exact same thing. And I'm just going to fill in that corner with some more texture. So you pick up your stop bead and you only run your needle back down through your crystal or your Orion bead or whatever it is that you're creating texture with. And like I said, I want to crowd these in here. I want these triangle beads to be going in all different directions. Okay, this is so gorgeous. The little teacup beads are just all clustered and crowded for texture in this corner. And I did one more thing. I used some E6000 and a toothpick and glued a little bit of that turquoise 2mm cup chain. I just wasn't really happy about seeing that tiny bit of my blue backing. And now I have like a continuous frame around my moon, and I am ready to I just love the little squiggles. I'm sorry, I love this so much. And I just have to say here, like, this is over the top and this is quite busy, and I just kept adding and adding. But you know, I showed you guys the more simple rows. You can just do simple beaded rows. So if you're looking at this saying, oh my goodness, what a concoction, you know, the same techniques can be used to create a totally different look. So I am going to be using some 8/0 seed beads for my modified brick stitch edge. But before I can get to that, I have rough cut a piece of the ultra suede backing. The sides are pretty similar, but this one has a little bit more texture. So I'm going to glue my entire piece on to this. So this side to this side. And I'm going to do the same thing you guys have seen me do. E6000. I want to spread it almost to the edge. You know, I want to spread it almost to the edge. When I do my stitching, I need to be coming through this backing, through this whole sandwich that I'm about to make by about 1/8 of an inch. So let me show you the back of my other one. My little stitches come about 1/8 of an inch. My chain is caught. They come about 1/8 of an inch onto the backing. So I don't want to have glue all the way up to the edge. The other thing that I mentioned when we started, let me put the lid on this so I can show you this. I embroidered on this very thick backing, so I don't feel that I need to do this. But if you do your embroidery on ultra suede and then you're going to do another ultra suede, you might want to sandwich in, glue in a layer of the cardboard. You could actually use the pattern that we made for that. And if you feel like it's not stiff enough or you want your piece stiffer, you can, you know, trim this down so that you're not putting your needle through the cardboard. Like, remove some, glue that on, then put a layer of glue here, and then put your backing. I'm not going to do that. I just don't feel it's necessary. This is pretty thick, and also I'm going to be doing loops here and here to hang this pendant. So I don't think it's necessary. But you can decide that piece by piece. Okay, nice even layer. I'm just going to center it right in the middle of this piece. And again, like, this is not the only thing that's going to hold my backing on. This is really just to keep it from shifting while I do my edging. So I'm just going to press just to make sure the glue is in contact on the back. And I'm going to just turn it over and just run my finger. You might want to let that dry a little bit before you trim. So I'm going to just trim around, just leaving a tiny bit. And same thing we did when we started. If your scissors can be completely parallel or perpendicular to this, not parallel, but perpendicular, that really helps you to get a nice straight edge that you can add your bead edging to. So I'm just going to do that all the way around, just right up to my backing, just using my backing as the guide. So it's going to look like that. You can see my little sandwich. Okay, so now my piece looks like that. That's what my backing looks like, and I'm just totally loving it. What I'm gonna do is a modified brick stitch, and if you know brick stitch, you'll see what I mean by that. And I'm gonna start back here where it won't show, because your first bead that you add on is a little bit wonky, and you connect it. I'm gonna go all the way around, and I'm gonna connect it where I started. So I'm gonna start here underneath my filigree, and like I said, I'm gonna have to work around this, but I was careful not to load up the very edge with glue. So, and I'm gonna come just past the filigree. And so let me show you where I'm inserting my needle. I like to work back to front. I'm gonna put my needle about of 1/8 of an inch in and come up through the backing that I did all the embroidery on and my ultra suede. And what you want to try to do is get your needle underneath the beads that are on the edge of your piece. Okay, I have my purple thread on this time, and I'm gonna leave a pretty good tail here where I was before, and 1/8 of an inch in, and go through my ultra suede and my backing. And I'm gonna pull this through and leave a tail that's long enough to either tie, or sometimes I put a needle on and weave it through when I connect. I'm starting here, I'm gonna do this all the way around, and I will connect this first bead to my last bead when I come back around. So I like to have a little tail to work with so that I can make it look good. And then I'm gonna pick up one of my beads and bring it down. And for me, like to keep this straight in my mind, I like the bead to sit right the way that I want it to sit on my edge. So in this case, it's modified brick stitch, and so I'm going to be looking straight down at the holes on these beads. And then I'm going to come back to where I just, very near to where I just poked through, and this is my starting bead. I'm just going to come back through again. Okay, and so I'm just making it's not sitting the way that I want, because I need to put my needle up through the bottom of the bead and, you know, pull the thread through. And I have about a wingspan of thread here because I'd like to do this edge on one continuous piece. It's not necessary to work with that much, but I'm pretty comfortable doing that. So this first bead always sits a little bit wonky because brick stitch is really supported by the beads that go next to it, and then, you know, in regular brick stitch on top of it. But that's okay. As long as your thread is coming straight up out of the top, it's going to start looking really good. I'm going to pick up another bead, and I'm going to come about a bead's length away, and that same at that same level, that 1/8 of an inch, to try to be as even as possible. And I'm poking up through my backing and my ultra suede and trying to be underneath the beads that are on the edge of my piece. And you'll see when you pull, this bead wants to lay on the back, but I don't want it to do that. I want it to sit on the edge right next to the other one. So I just use my finger to get it in place. We get that tail out of the way. And, you know, to get it in place the way that I want it. And then my needle needs to go back up through that bead that I just added from the bottom to the top. So on this edge, there are a lot of edges you can do. And my next piece, I'm going to show you guys a really cool one that I love. But you always want to be coming out of the top of the bead. As I build on these rows, I'll be looking, you know, at the top. And the first two never, they look wonky and they don't look, you know, great like they will. So don't be discouraged. That's just the starting. So I'm coming out the top. I'm going to pick up another bead, and I'm going to go about 1/8 of an inch down on my backing and about a bead's width away. And so see where my needle is coming up? It's coming up on this side of my bugle bead frame. I don't want that. I'm going to back down a little bit and get on this side. I want that needle to be coming underneath my beads that are on the edge of my piece. So again, it just makes a loop here. Get that tail thread out of the way. It makes a loop here. And those beads, they really want to go to the back, but I'm going to push it with my finger right up next to my other one and then put my needle up from the bottom, coming out the top. And you just give it a little tug, and just like regular brick stitch, tug straight up, and that lines up your beads. So you can see that's only 3 beads. This first one is going to stay wonky until I come around and connect it to the last bead that I add. But it's just like that all the way around. We'll do it again. Pick up a bead. I'm going to come about that 1/8 of an inch. Make sure I'm picking up my backing and my ultra suede. Make sure that I'm coming out on the right side of the beads in my piece, and pull it through, and just push that bead up into place. This tail, we're still pretty close to that tail, so it keeps making its way in, but I'm just going to push it up with my finger. That helps me to kind of see, you know, hold it in place before I stitch it in place, I guess. And again, just pull straight up out the top, and look how gorgeous that edging is. And I love the texture of this edging. I think that is gorgeous, but what that does is gives you a spot to build on, just like in brick stitch. So I think that I'm going to do a little bit of fringe on this point, and I'll be able to come out of the holes in the right direction, and also adding my loops. I'll show you what I mean when we get to it, but I'm going to do this all the way around. Pick up a bead. I'm going to come to my backing about an 1/8 inch away from the edge, and then about a bead's width away from the last bead, and just make sure that I'm coming underneath my beads, and I am not. I have picked up the couching thread from my bugle beads, so I'm just going to back my needle down and just make sure that I'm coming underneath the beads that are on the edge. And you'll have places on your piece where, you know, you've gotten a little close to the edge and it might feel a little challenging, but you can do it. Just go slowly and, you know, make it nice and neat. You're not a machine, and the quality, the handmade quality of stitching every single bead onto a piece is just absolutely phenomenal in a world riddled with AI and mass manufacturing. There's something so special about this. So again, I'm just going to, you know, make that bead sit the way that I want, and put my needle up through the bottom. And you go around your corners and your, you know, your funny shapes, just like that, 1 bead at a time, and just pull straight up, pick up another bead, 1/8 inch away. So I'm using my previous stitch as the spot to put my needle, and just gonna come straight up. And again, I got it really well that time, coming underneath. I got my needle so that it is underneath that edge part of my design. Okay, my edge is done. I'm totally in love with it. And I neglected to mention, I chose 8/0 seed beads to make a little bit chunkier edge, but you can do this same thing with 11/0 seed beads, or with anything you want, really. Drux work, anything you want. But I just like that chunky edge, and I think it backs up my frame with the twisted bugle beads really well. So this is what the back looks like. And as I told you, I was going to have to deal with the fact that I glued this metal filigree in here. And so I tried everything to continue getting my needle through, to continue this stitch through the back. And I could have left it off because, as you see, it doesn't show at all on the front. But I really didn't like having an unfinished edge on the back. So I did the same technique that we did for the bugle beads frame and threaded on a row of 8/0 seed beads that were this length. And then I put a little tiny bit of glue just along there and laid those seed beads along that edge and then poked my needle back through and I'm back to connect to where I started here and to straighten out this first bead. So I'm going to do the same thing I've been doing, pick up one of my 8/0 seed beads and just go through everything, making sure that I'm under those beads. Back to that tail being in my way. I'm gonna just set that one in there the way that it needs to go and go up through the bead and just give that a pull. And then I'm gonna pick up my last bead and go right in there. And go up that one just like I have been. And now this is just like brick stitch if you know brick stitch. In order to make this bead sit the way that I need it to, I'm going to go down through that bead. My thread is catching on everything. Go down through that bead. Get my tail out of the way there. And I'm going to go up through the previous bead just to connect them, push that into place. I'm going to go down through it again, and then I'm going to go up the next one. And if I need to go through it again, like I really want it to stand in line like a little soldier. So if that means another pass, that's actually pretty good. But you know, I'll do that until I'm happy with it. So right here where I, met up, I can stand a little bit more reinforcing. So I am going to go back down through and work my way over there. And then I'll show you, I did half of my loops already, and I'll show you what the cool closure that I decided to do for, or not closure, the cool that I bailed down, because I have my thread going through them in the other direction. And I'm just going to wiggle my way up to here, and I'll show you this cool bail that I created. I'm really excited about it. So just wiggle my way. I'm not coming through my backing. And that will give me a nice secure loop. And nothing shows on the back. So what I did is I took some of the little check glass rice shaped pearls that I had, and I had less of the turquoise and more of the purple. So I just alternated them. It's 5 of those beads separated by 3 11/0 seed beads. And I counted from the corner 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I have a loop in the 6th one, the 7th one, and the 8th one. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And every time I came straight up out of one of my edge stitches, threaded on my beads and went right back down in the loop. So let me count over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I would be coming out of this one right here. So let me just poke my needle through. I'm trying to hide my stitches underneath my stitches that are on the front because, they would show on the back. So let me count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So right there, I want to get my needle coming out, straight out the top. That's the beauty of this modified brick stitch on the edge of your piece, is that it gives you a place to create other things. So in this case, I'm going to create these triple loops for my chain or leather or whatever I want to go through, and the pendant will hang that way. But if you wanted to do like a decorative edge, if you wanted to go back and add some sort of a picot edge where you thread on 3 beads or 5 beads and go in the next one, come out the next one, 5 beads in the next one, you can create like a lacy kind of a kind of a ruffly edge when you have this, you know, brick stitch base to work from. Okay, so the first one is purple, 3 11-0s, purple, 3 11-0s, until I have 5 on here. Okay, so that is my loop pattern, and I'm just gonna feed that down. And I'm coming out of this bead. I'm going to go right back through this bead, and I am going to try to get my needle to come out in the same spot as my first stitch. So if you have to do it a little at a time, like I'm not through the ultra suede, I'm just through the bead, but I'm going to run my needle back over that exact stitch that I already did, and I can come right through the front, and that makes this pretty secure because I'm underneath my frame. And I even sometimes will go like a little further in for a bail just to attach it. It disappears underneath, especially these textured sections. So I'm gonna come back and go through that loop again to reinforce it. And you may not be able to get it, like I didn't get through the bead, but that's okay. I'm where I need to be to get to the bead. And I'm just going to poke my needle up through the bead that the loop is coming out of, and just slowly make my way through all of those loop beads, just so that it's nice and strong. It is not heavy at all. Even though it's very bold, it's not heavy at all. But the other thing this does is it stiffens the loops, which will make it easier to slide different chains and leather in and out. Okay, back down through. And I'm going to make my way over to the very next bead. I'm going to use that same stitch and kind of poke through the front and be coming up from the next bead. And this gets the same loop pattern, but with turquoise. And then the last one is the next bead over with purple. So I'm going to get that done, and I'll show you what it looks like. I have a chain here that I can put through, but when we come back, we have to decide, this is like the last thing, if we want to create some fringe. My loops are done, and they are ready for a chain or a leather cord or whatever I want. I have a beautiful purple metallic leather cord that I think would be pretty in here. I also have turquoise and gold chain, like all of that would be good. I have a lot of golds in here. I'm totally in love with this, and I did decide to do a few little bits of fringe. So I burned a little burned a little knot on the end and just poked through, and I am coming out of this very middle bead on that point. And then this is my pattern. I'll lay it down on the mat. This is my pattern, just some bugle beads separated. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see a little bit better. Bugle beads separated by an 11-0 seed bead, my last rhombus bead, and then I put three seed beads on, and then my dagger bead, and then I'm going to pick up 3 more seed beads, and that's going to create a little sort of holder. So 3 more seed beads, and then I'm going to go back up through my rhombus bead and all of my beads and get back up to my pendant and tie, tie off or start another strand. So you're just gonna be like using that as a stopper bead like that. So I'm just gonna make sure that when I'm passing through that I don't miss a bead, because you definitely, after all this time and stitching and beading, want like a thread hanging on the outside of your fringe. So same thing that I did with my loops. With my loops at the top, I'm just going to find a spot to hide my thread, I'm going to go back through that bead and kind of hide in amongst my beads on the front. And if I pull this through to the back, I will try to put this over one of my existing stitches so that my back stays, you know, really pretty. So I'm just going to pull this pretty tight and poke down through. And so like if I'm coming out of the back, and if I want to come out the back, I'll try to go right where I already have a stitch. My needle just popped out. So this is not that easy under the camera lens, but it's really not that hard because you're really just finding a little unobtrusive spot. Like I want to go back up so I don't distort my edging. And so I'm coming out of that bead right there, and I can design my fringe. And so what I was thinking is maybe I have plenty of these North Star beads, but I was thinking of using my last 3 daggers. So I'm just going to play with how I want to create my last little bit of fringe here and what I want to use of my leftover beads from the project. And I'm going to do that same thing, just run back up through, and I think it's going to end up being 5 bits of fringe, which is really similar. I mean, it's almost the same thing. I really liked this, I guess, because I'm almost doing the same design. That's the fringe on this one. I really liked it. So I'm going to create something similar to that, and it'll just be a second for you. Wow. I just love it. Everything's done. My fringe is done. I had a little gold-plated half like crescent moon, and it is just the perfect little dangle. I know this isn't a great way to see it, so I'll put better pictures up, but look at this, the texture, like it is magical. It's absolutely magical. I love this piece. I love the way that it turned out. I actually loved this one, but I think I love this one more. So if you haven't seen this before on my channel, one of the things that I do is keep long leather cords that are just blank with no pendants on them, and they have fairly small closures on the end. And so I have like turquoise and purple, and I have this bronzy color which looks great through the pendant. I can also, my chains from Purity Beads that are interchangeable. So I have several different thicknesses or scales of chain, and that can also go through. So I have a lot of wearing options. If I want to, make this more boho, I can use the leather. If I want to make it a little more dressy, I can use the gold chain. I am so in love with this. These projects are so amazing and so relaxing and so creative. And as you can see, I could keep going. I could honestly keep going with the creating. I have to stop myself, but that was like the final little little embellishment. I just couldn't help myself. I thought about some stars, but I have the North Stars over here, so it's so sweet. And like I feel like I have my little moon craters up here, and that I sort of kept the mysterious man in the moon theme going. So I definitely have more of these projects coming for you guys. I hope this inspired you. I hope you feel like you can do this now. I really tried to go slowly and break it down step by step, and I know it makes the videos a lot longer, but these are not quick projects for sure, but that doesn't mean that they're not doable. And they're really easy, and they're really like you can really get into it. It's so good for the soul. I mean, it really is. So I thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel, and a thumbs up is always appreciated, and or a hype. That really helps support a creator's work, and YouTube shows the channel to more people, and so we grow the community a little bit. I've made so many friends with my channel, so take a second to do that if you don't mind. Thanks a lot, everybody. See you in the next video. Oh my gosh, it was so cold here last night. Everything froze. Look at my fountain, you guys. My fountain froze. Can you believe that? Icicles in Florida. Incredible. And it was so windy. What a mess. My patio is a mess. We had like 40-mile-an-hour winds, so everything got rearranged. But ice in the fountain, no way. Crazy. I think I lost my lemon tree because the blanket came off of it in the wind.